All right, so an unusually flat day here in Santa Cruz. Beautiful weather though. I'm here with my friend Matt, and we're gonna do the typical thing here, just a little coastal scene. I'm thinking of doing something maybe like this here, including, you know, the wet sand along here. It's pretty clear today. There's not a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, but I am gonna push these distant cliffs back using atmospheric perspective. So I will be lightening them in value and also cooling them off a bit. All right, so Matt is set up over here, and this is Matt's first time out here. Like, how are you feeling already? Are you feeling good? All right.
Nice. I mean, we're at Pleasure Point.
Right. How could you go wrong?
For years, so
yeah,
it's awesome.
First plein air, man. This is the place to do it. All right, so I've got my tripod easel today. I'm going to be painting on a 12 by 16 inch panel. My usual palette of colors, but I do have a couple of guest colors here, actually. This is a transparent yellow oxide. Also, I've got some Viridian. And what else? Cobalt, and I've got cobalt teal. So actually quite a few guest colors. And this one is just, I think it's, I can't even remember the name of it, but it's basically titanium white with a bit of ultramarine in it. I actually forgot liquid today, so I'm experimenting with solvent-free gel from Gamblin. So we'll see how that goes. So as usual, I'm gonna tone with burnt sienna. So I just thinned the burnt sienna with odorless mineral spirits, and I'm using a number 6 natural bristle brush. Kind of mop it on here and keep it pretty thin. And as I've mentioned before, the idea behind toning is that some of this orange will pop through at the end, and it creates a nice feeling of luminosity. So once I get the big shapes in place, then I come in and start doing a little bit of definition. So, you know, I just got the cliffs here, there's distant cliffs here, wet sand in this area. And like I said, just kind of rough, simple shapes, and now I can get a little bit more specific. Still not, you know, not being very detailed, but just a little more careful about, you know, the particulars of the shapes. This is a tree up here that corresponds with this tree right there. Distant land out here. And this, I'll be using atmospheric perspective on this portion of land to separate it from this this land in the foreground. Actually got my horizon a little bit too high, so it's more like right here. So I'll just erase that. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. Cliffs in the foreground, distant cliffs, tree up on this cliff. What I really want to focus in on is, you know, capturing the wet sand effect here, which I always find to be really challenging. As the water, you know, washes out, you can see there's like reflected sky, but then there's also bits of the color of the sand mixed in, and then like right here, some yellow from the cliff. So there's a lot of reflections going on. All right, let's check in with Matt. I think he's got his sketch going here. You're doing like a, almost kind of a more zoomed in version than I'm doing, which I think is really cool. You've got that tree also up top, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I got the O'Neill house. Not sure if it's gonna make it in the final.
Oh yeah, you included a little house.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's gonna be there or not.
Oh yeah, Jack O'Neill's house right there. You're also gonna focus on wet sand as well, right?
Yeah, mainly right in here, of course. Kind of like leading your eye. Back over here, hopefully there's a little wave we could capture.
Right, right. Cool, looks good.
Excellent.
All right, so as usual, starting with my darks, and I'm starting with some burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And I'm mixing in a little bit of this solvent-free gel from Gamblin. The darkest portions in this painting are actually the rocks where they meet the water. And there are some little areas of shadow as well. When I'm trying to establish a dark pattern, I'm just squinting at the scene to simplify. There aren't a lot of strong darks in here, just like I said, along the water line, and then this tree and some of the foliage on the hill here. There are some dark shapes in the distance. I'm going to keep those a little bit lighter though, as I mentioned, to push them back into the distance. I'm going to use the same mixture, except I'm adding a little bit more ultramarine blue and more titanium white to lighten it up. Some distant palm trees there. And so that already feels like it's pushed back a bit. All right, so next I'm mixing up colors for the sky, and here I've got titanium white with phthalo blue, and here is titanium white with ultramarine. This cerulean mixture here is going to be closer to the horizon. As I mentioned before, I use the sky to kind of carve out some of the shapes, like say a tree, or these distant trees. So using negative space to define positive shapes. Using a fairly big brush here and trying not to be too careful. Just because I like some of the sort of accidental things that happen. And I'm going to leave some of the orange of the tone showing through. All right, next I'm mixing up a color for the water, and I'm using ultramarine blue, some cadmium yellow medium, and titanium white, and I'm mixing it next to my sky color here so that I can sort of gauge the value. All right, and I'm gonna try to leave some little areas unpainted to kind of suggest where the white water is. There's kind of some white water around these rocks, and the surf is pretty mellow today, so the line of white water along here is pretty thin. All right, so Matt's blocked in his sky and then also sort of mapped out some of the darks. But we were just talking about how judging the value of the sky is so challenging when you're outdoors because it's super bright. And so, he mixed it up on his palette here, and that's the sky color on the palette. But then you can see up here, it's a lot darker. It's like a challenge, darker, yeah. Right? Because it's so bright out here. The color looks good. Sometimes when I'm at a point like this, I might knock it down a little bit with a palette knife and then just mix white directly onto the panel. All right, so next I want to mix a color for the wet sand closest to the rocks, and it almost looks like a greenish color. So I'm going with burnt sienna and cadmium yellow medium and just a touch of ultramarine blue. I kind of like to keep this transparent as well. And there's some warmer tones in there that are almost like orangey kind of tones, and I can add those afterwards. Right, and then there's some lighter reflections in here as well. I'm adding a bit of cadmium yellow medium and titanium white, and they're kind of just right in here, more or less reflecting the light off the cliffs. Okay, and then for the other portions of wet sand, it looks sort of like a purplish color. I'm using dioxazine purple, some burnt sienna, and titanium white. This will have some lighter, more sky blue colors, but I'm just going to establish the darker base, so to speak. As you can see, there's purple areas, but then also reflected blue sky. I'm going to try to keep some energy in this brushwork here. Oh yeah, that definitely looks better, for sure. And so did you just mixed in white into the color that was on there?
Yeah, I just scraped it off with the palette knife, then wiped it down a little bit, and then added the white directly. I kind of mixed it up first on the board, and then
on the palette. Yeah, yeah,
went in there.
Yeah, that'll do it for sure. And then also too, like you can adjust it later, like how right along the horizon is always a little bit lighter, and then it gets like a darker blue as it goes up high. But like I always adjust that stuff after I've got the whole thing blocked in.
Right?
Yeah. So that's a good start right there.
Isn't there a little bit of yellow too on the? Is it?
There is sometimes like yellow along there. That's right. I mean, I see that as well, like right in here. The challenge is if you mix yellow in with blue, you get green, right? So that can be a challenge. But sometimes I'll use, white with a touch of cadmium yellow lemon right along there. Especially after the paint sets for a little bit, you'll maybe get a little less mixing. So
it won't mix together so much.
Yeah, that could work. So next I want to mix up a color for the sand here, and I'm actually gonna warm things up a bit. So I'm using one of my guest colors here, this transparent yellow oxide, and I'm mixing it with some dioxazine purple and titanium white. Oftentimes I'll mix up the sand, I'll make it way too light. The white water is the highest value, so I want to compare all of my values to that white water. And there's a soft edge where the dry sand meets the wet sand. All right, so I'm going to exaggerate the warmth in the cliff in the foreground. I'm using cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red light, and a bit of burnt sienna and titanium white. And I've actually kind of calmed it down a little bit by adding the complement to orange, which would be ultramarine blue. And I want to have nice separation between this cliff and this one in the distance. Just sort of scrubbing in a general color, keeping it fairly thin so I can, make adjustments. Also, this orange color is a nice complement to all the blues that are in the painting. And I will add some, reflected orange in the wet sand as well. Just kind of warm up those areas that were kind of yellow. So for the distant cliffs, I'm adding some dioxazine purple and titanium white to the warm mixture here, this orange mixture. And this will hopefully push those cliffs into the distance. I'll probably need to adjust these colors, but this is a good starting point. I can just stand back and see if I'm getting, a sense of depth, which it looks like I am. I mean, that might be a little bit too extreme. You can see this is much cooler, much grayer than this. So at this point, everything is more or less blocked in, and now I'm gonna, just start putting in some of the white water. Just using pretty much just straight titanium white and whatever colors on my brush, which I think is just, kind of a bluish color. And I try to put the white water portions in, somewhat spontaneously. I try not to be too careful with it. Okay, I like that right there. And then down here, I might actually keep it kind of darker in value so that, this area draws the most interest. This nice motion in the water. And the rocks too. First plein air outing, like how do you feel?
I feel good. I feel good that I got it out of the way and I did it, and I feel more comfortable now. So
were you like a little anxious beforehand?
Super anxious.
And then once you get started though, right? It's like once you're started, you're not thinking about it anymore.
Yeah. It was nothing. These people were walking by. I was kind of concerned about people walking by, but
it's like nothing
to me. Yeah, it was nothing though. So.
Exactly. Awesome. Right on, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you did it. You did it. All right, so here's what I finished up with. And as I mentioned, I was trying to get some sky reflections on the sand here, nice cliff reflections over here. This wet sand portion is always a challenge for me, but I do feel like it worked out. And There are a few things that I'm going to change or, do touch-ups on, but I wanted to show you guys first. Number one, the separation of these two cliffs right here. Do you notice how like the foliage along the top kind of blends in one to the other, like one line? That is not good. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to lighten the value of the greens in the distance. The light portion of the cliff actually works out. It's quite a bit cooler than the cliffs in the foreground. As I mentioned, I warmed these up artificially. They're actually kind of similar to the sand color, so I wanted to get separation, and I also wanted to have that warmth to create a light effect, and then also to create atmospheric perspective. So one thing you could do with atmospheric perspective is you can cool off and lighten values of things in the distance, but you can also warm up and increase the contrast on things that are in the foreground. You can go both ways. All right, so here is a little close-up. I wanted you guys to see right in here these darks, how I keep them transparent. I do like how you can see little bits of the orange coming through. And then also right here, where the foliage from the cliff in the foreground and the one in the background meet, you can see that the value is just too close together. So if I lighten the value of the ones in the distance, I think I'll get some separation. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. This week, actually, I'm gonna put a link down below to a sample Patreon video so you can see what sort of videos I post on Patreon. Check it out, and if you like what you see and you wanna see some more, there's a Patreon link down below as well. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.